Hey friends, welcome back to Heretical Hippies, where Anna and Kari Jo wander back into the wreckage of their deconstruction to see if they can offer hope to anyone else who might be climbing out of the dust and ashes of their faith. Buckle up, it's about to get real. Hey people, welcome back. This is part 4 of 4, where Anna and I are discussing the 4 different areas of control that cults use. So the bite model, again, if this is your first time tuning in, we are using that was developed by Dr. Stephen Hassan, and you can find it on the website freedomofmind.com. BITE, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. We all have emotions. We can't get around that. Some of us experience them more high and low than others, but we all have a range of emotions that are both normal and sometimes uncomfortable. I think we can all agree on that. Anna and I actually experience emotions in a very different way. Anna is very even keeled. She's much more like my husband is. Not a lot of highs and lows. I'm all over the place. I'm high, low, inside out, upside down, every which way. If you know me, you know that's true. So we will have experienced emotional control in probably very different ways. We haven't really discussed it together yet, but Anna is here to give her experience alongside of mine. So, Anna, super glad that we can have this conversation today.
Yeah, this is really good.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump right in. The first one on this list is manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. So we kind of touched on that just before we hit record. Anna, do you want to expound on that a little bit, where you were talking about some emotions were kind of not allowed in your experience?
Dude, yeah, I think the emotional control portion of this I can relate to the most. I think because, I mean, even though on the outside I'm pretty even keel, like I definitely have my ups and downs, don't get me wrong. But in general, like I feel like I do feel really deeply and I care a lot and I'm a very empathetic person in my opinion. And
You are.
Okay, great. It's
I'll
good to know
confirm
that I'm
that.
assessing myself fairly accurately. But so that I think those type of people are the ones the most vulnerable with the
Hmm.
emotional control, you know? Because there's this deep, I think, like emotion, people that are empathetic generally also struggle with people pleasing, you know?
Right.
I think everybody struggles with that. So just the desire to want to impress too. Like I had mentors that I really, really wanted to impress all the time, you know,
Mm.
and I felt like my choices were directly like connected in a real way to who they were and what they were able to accomplish. You know, were they being successful and their discipleship of me? You
Hmm.
know, I wanted them to be successful. I wanted to be successful myself and proving that I could grow or mature or be who they thought I should be.
Right.
And there were situations where I felt like I had let people down, and I literally felt like I was a complete failure. And then there were times where I felt really successful at being the Christian that I was supposed to be, and it made me feel like I had succeeded in life, you know?
Hmm.
So there's so much emotion connected to our identity in this religion, in this culture, that is a fucking roller coaster for
Yeah.
me. For me, it was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And when I think back on it, that's probably where most of my quote unquote trauma came in.
Hmm. I relate to that. Same for me. The trauma. I developed a really poor sense of self because of having to suppress who I really was in order to meet certain expectations, whether it be of a mentor or the subculture of the church, whatever church I'm involved in at the time. You know, there are those unspoken, unwritten rules that we've talked about before that you're constantly trying to measure up to that. And in self-assessing, that requires a constant self-assessment. And in that self-assessment habit, I guess, we're told to look for things that we need to repent from, look for ways that we aren't measuring up. Like you mentioned, with your mentor, that's something I experienced as well. And it's hard because you're constantly reevaluating yourself, your behavior, your choices, your thoughts, attitudes, all of it. You name it, you're reevaluating it and looking for the things that are wrong.
Mhm.
So to like develop that type of attitude toward yourself is so harmful. It it doesn't allow for you to have healthy expectations for the way others should be treating you because you treat yourself like shit. There's
Yeah.
always this self-deprecating attitude that you're carrying around.
Mhm.
And that's actually one of the things on the list here. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as, and there are several subpoints under this, identity guilt. So, like if you are in the LGBTQIA plus community, that would be an example of identity guilt. You're not living up to your potential. Your family is deficient. Your past is suspect. I mean, if you're a human and you have a conversion experience into Christianity, 100% your past is suspect, right? Because you weren't following Jesus. There's always this before and after. So also your affiliations are unwise. And that's, again, I think that ties back into behavior control, manipulating who you spend time with, that type of thing. Your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish. And I think I'll just add my 2 cents here. As a woman, especially, those thoughts were promoted. You always put others first, whether it's your family, like your husband, your kids, your extended family. You give of your time, you sacrifice of your energy, your resources to serve in the nursery, in the church. I mean, it's like this whole snowball effect that your feelings and actions are irrelevant or selfish. You always have to be giving, always. And another one under this list is social guilt and historical guilt. Are there any of those that you want to touch on? Like I kind of threw in my 2 cents worth. I can read them again if you'd like to hear them.
Yeah, read them down.
Okay, identity guilt. You're not living up to your potential. Your family is deficient. Your past is suspect. Your affiliations are unwise. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions are irrelevant or selfish. Social guilt, historical guilt.
Man, guilt is such a broad term, and there's a lot going on there, and all those things you just
I
listed.
know. I know.
Yeah, I think the always like what you briefly mentioned just before this is about always giving. That I definitely can relate to, especially well, I think men and women, but women, I feel like because of the role of the mother and the culture, kind of supports this constantly going
Mhm.
kind of model, you know.
Right.
Um,
Well, and Anna, when you're called to submit, you better damn well do it.
right. Yeah.
You better
Yeah.
volunteer for the nursery
Yeah,
every
your life
Sunday.
is not your own.
Right.
You are a sacrifice, right?
Yep.
You are constantly dying to yourself.
Yep.
And although, however noble aspects of that can be at times, it, for me, in my experience, became a constant thing. Now, granted, I had 5 kids, and I chose to homeschool them. And I made choices along this path that put me in a position to have a very full plate all the time, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, and so there's a lot of guilt because you're never going to live up or measure up
Right.
to whatever, Proverbs, what was it?
Proverbs 31 woman, that's what
31
I was
woman,
just
right?
thinking.
You're
Yes.
never going to live up to that. There are aspects of it, and I struggled with that even within as a Christian, talking to friends about how in the hell are we supposed to do this,
Right.
And I remember, being told that, and this was actually pretty wise, that like, yeah, that's the model, but that's just to spur us on, right? To do better, not necessarily like that's where we have to be right now.
Right.
And I can see that. It's just to encourage us, right? But it's also kind of daunting because wait a minute. I mean, I'm like constantly everything all the time giving up for other people, and As I got older, I did take more time for myself, but I always felt guilty when I did it.
Of
You know?
course. And
Yeah.
that's the unhealthy byproduct of being told that you should constantly be serving. And plus, back up a second, I would like to see the parallel passage of the Proverbs 31 woman for the whatever upright Proverbs 32 man, right? Like, why do they not have a list that they
Sure.
need to be constantly striving for and
Yeah.
hear a sermon about that every fucking Mother's Day or whatever? Right? I
Right.
mean, tell me you have not heard that as a sermon on Mother's Day or women's appreciate oh, they wouldn't appreciate women, but everyone's heard that,
Sure.
whether it was in a women's small group or from the pulpit, keeping our women in line. Hee hee. Oh, god damn it. I should take a cold shower. That makes me so mad. But
Too bad that
ah,
yeah, that's
ooh,
yeah,
deep
it's
breath.
identity guilt and family you said family deficient, that's one thing that kinda stood out to me because I felt like we were constantly trying to rein in each family member to conform to what we thought we were supposed to look like, you know?
Yes,
Really what we were trying to do is raise a godly family, quote unquote.
exactly.
We were trying to just do what was right, and sure, love our kids well. And sure, did we learn a lot along the way? Absolutely. Sure. Are we better people in some ways for it? Absolutely. Um, but the stress, the unnecessary stress and the unnecessary guilt to live up to a certain standard
Mhm.
is unnecessary.
And not to mention the damage that it's doing to our kids
We
as
do.
we have these unrealistic expectations of them, unbeknownst to us. We're just
Right.
expecting of them what we're told we should expect of them.
Right.
And, to fall in line, to conform, that I can't speak to that. I was not a child, when I was enduring indoctrination. I mean, I
Right.
kind of was. I was 18 when it started, but I was not in those formative years. And
Right.
so the damage that's happening to the children within these spaces is confounding, and I honestly don't wanna think about it, like,
We
it's
do.
really depressing. But
Yeah.
yes, that lines up with, your family is deficient,
We do.
and we're always told to be, like, looking looking for areas to improve. So
Mhm.
if we can't find an area to improve in ourselves, then naturally we're gonna look at our children next, right? Like,
Mhm.
next on the list.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
I think
emotional control is really messy,
oh,
like,
super.
because so much of it is, the your personality type, and, but a lot of that is manipulated by these standards that are, seem impossible and the expectations for your family to fit into this church or for your family to fit into this small group or this situation you've got to do and act and be a certain way. And yeah, that's too much. It's too much to try to live up to, and it's damaging overall to everybody in the family. And
It
I
is.
feel a lot of guilt about that too.
Yeah,
Feel guilt about, and it's funny because 'cause we're talking about how damaging the guilt is, and now we're still dealing with it, you know?
right. I don't
Yeah.
imagine being able to just fully walk away from that. I think it's gonna take a lot of intentionality, a lot of therapy sessions, a lot of just humbly accepting the
Mm,
damage that was caused, not only within ourselves, but that we caused as mothers, as wives, as whatever, as sheep. It takes a lot. And it's okay. I'm recognizing that more and more as I find more healing and I have more therapy sessions. But it at times it does bring up anger, and it just pisses me off that I have so much baggage, so much unpacking to do of the trauma that, like you said, the lingering effects of it, and I have to pay for that. I'm paying out of my pocket for help with dealing with the fallout of the system that is so harmful.
mm.
And I've said so many times, I want my tithe money back. I want my tithe money back. I wanna pay for my therapy sessions, please. But that's not gonna happen, so here we are, but It's okay. I should
Yeah,
get a t-shirt. I want my tithe money back to pay for my therapy. People would buy that shit.
Yeah, they
Anna,
would.
we should have merch. We should get merch. That's gonna be our first one.
Okay, go for it.
Or
Let's do
peace
it.
out, MFers. That could be another one. Maybe that could be on the back.
Yeah, that's right. I love
Stay
it.
tuned, people. We might have merch coming. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to move on. We're a little bit limited on time, and we've spent a lot of time unpacking the bite model, and there's so much overlap one to the next. But this next one is huge and a really important component of the way the system manipulates and controls, and that is fear. Instill fear, such as fear of, and there's a list here, I'll read them. Fear of thinking independently, fear of the outside world, fear of enemies, fear of losing one's salvation, fear of leaving or being shunned by the group, fear of others' disapproval. Every single one of those I have experienced. I can just give like a few little examples. Thinking independently, I've already talked about that. You know, you're not allowed to question things. You know, sit down, shut up. Fear of the outside world, absolutely. You're told that tarot cards are evil. You're told that, I don't know, fill in the blank, whatever stupid thing. I don't know. Like I'm not coming up with concrete examples, but anything outside of what's deemed permissible is the outside world, and you should be fearful of it. Fear of enemies. Wow. Okay, so we could label a lot of things or people enemies to get political, but the far right conservatives would say liberals are the enemy, right? Just as an example, we are told within most evangelical circles that the queer community are the enemies. Love the sinner, hate the sin. That absolutely loathe that. So those are some examples. Losing one's salvation. This is so fascinating to me because I was never in a camp where I was taught that you could lose your salvation. I was taught that, you know, once saved, always saved. And so it's interesting that once people like myself walk away, some people from those same spaces that I kind of walked away from would say, oh, well, maybe she was never a real Christian. She was never a true believer. Okay, really? Well, then fancy me this. Look at the fruit of the time that I was in Christianity. At the time it was good enough for you. Like you believed I was a believer then, but now I'm not.
Right.
What? It's just this weird double standard. And again, that's like, those are things that they use to shut down the critical thinking, to quell the cognitive dissonance that we experience so much of. Leaving or being shunned by the group. Yeah. Like and we talked about this too. Like I've been shunned by many people, which is also ironic because if they genuinely think I'm going to hell, they've just written me off. You know, they're not pursuing me. And then fear of others' disapproval. That was huge. That was really huge when I was slowly backing away from the monster. I knew what it was going to cost me. Like you mentioned earlier, there's a huge, huge cost that we have to deal with in making that choice, whether we know it consciously or whether we just know it intuitively. We're going to lose a lot of stuff, a lot of positive things, but maybe also damaging. So I would love to hear your reflection on that list of the things that we're taught to fear.
You know, it's funny. I was listening to someone talk yesterday about their walk as a Christian, and it's a video online, and they were comparing it to the parable of the 10 virgins in the scriptures in Matthew, I think chapter 10. And, you know, there's the 5 virgins that have their lamps full of oil, and they stay out all night long with their lamps lit, waiting for the bridegroom, right? Which obviously, if you're listening to this, you've heard this parable, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, the bridegroom is Jesus, and he's coming back to get his church. And the many brides, the 10 brides in this parable are the church. And but there's 10 brides that run out of oil, and they run back to the house to get more oil. And while they're gone, the bridegroom comes and takes the 5 that were ready, that were prepared. And I share that, but I have that tattoo on my arm. It's huge, massive parable. It's like a lino cut print that I found in a book once and just loved it and got it tattooed on my arm, and it still means something. I have actually evolved in my understanding of this parable because obviously I'm not a Christian anymore. And so I don't look at it the same way that I used to look at it. But and when I was listening to him talk about it, he was saying that basically he wanted to be the bride with the oil, right? And I was that person. I wanted
Mhm.
to be the bride with the oil. And I mean, thinking about it makes me so, I don't know, it's a bizarre idea to be so entrenched in a way of thinking and so entrenched in this identity with a culture and a religion to never even imagine that you're going to be outside of that.
Mhm.
And coming to the edge of it and then realizing you have a choice. That is fucking scary. It's
Yeah.
really, really scary. And I was very afraid of what was outside of Christianity. I was very afraid of leaving my faith. I still am extremely afraid of other people's disapproval. I still am working that out in myself. There are some people that I've learned to let go of. I don't care as much, but there are still some people in my life that I just don't want to be disappointed.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fear that you're talking about, I still deal with it.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
still
and I
deal with
think that's a very human thing
it.
to fear others' disapproval. But it's like the church has used that against us, right? They've capitalized on that, understanding that that is kind of a basic need of humans to have at least the approval of some people. We need that.
Right.
And I also still struggle with that on some levels. But I want to share one example of a way that I kind of got past that. So early on, and when I say early on, I mean like probably about a year ago. The fast track version for me, probably about a year ago, I was really struggling with, I'm trying to find freedom. I'm trying to make choices on my own, find that autonomy that I was robbed of for so many years. And when I was coming up against, or not coming up against, but when I was in those spaces of like making those decisions or trying something new that I was never allowed to try before because it was wrong or sinful or what would lead down the wrong path or whatever, I would find myself having this thought of, oh, what would so and so think?
Mhm.
What would they say to me if they knew, or if so and so only knew that I was thinking this or I was reading about this or watching this or whatever. I felt haunted. I almost felt like they were sitting on my shoulder in
Yeah.
a really not so cool way. And so this is so interesting. If anybody's a Ted Lasso fan, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, you're gonna hear F-bombs. So if you want to fast forward, you can. There's this really beautiful scene, and it's honestly my favorite scene of the whole series. And there's a lot of really good ones. Ted comes home. His mom is visiting. He's got a beef with her. He's kind of pissed. He comes home and he just starts in on her. She'd cooked this dinner and he's like, "Mom, fuck you for fill in the blank. And thank you for something else." And then he just keeps going, "Fuck you for this. But thank you for this." And it was like I had tears running down my face because it was so powerful. It was so raw. It was healing for him. It was also healing for her because while she's also receiving the fuck you, she's also receiving the thank you. So it's almost like this like I need to cut this abscess open and then the thank you is applying the salve and the bandage. Like
Mhm.
it was so beautiful, and so I used that for this person that kept haunting me. I didn't send it to them, okay? They don't know that I wrote any of this stuff, but I wrote that, "Fuck you for this, thank you for this," the whole thing. I had, like, a whole page, maybe a page and a half, and that was very freeing for me. Somehow, it just felt good to kinda get it off my chest, and I think once I was able to express those "fuck yous," it was like what they thought or what they might have thought, this theoretical judgment that I was making up in my head, the importance of that diminished. it didn't
Mm,
matter
mm,
because I was able to find things also to be grateful for. And
mm.
it's kind of like the gratitude was the flip side of the negative aspect of what I was pissed about. Because most things are like that. Most things are a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
And that was very freeing to kind of release me from the fear of what so and so might think or what would be said if they knew I was doing such and such or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's beautiful. I love that example. I'm actually gonna go in my quiet time this week and try it. And
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to, like, embrace it for what it is and not try to run from the part that you're trying to hide from, you know? Just
right.
embrace it.
Exactly. Okay. Well, Anna, we need to wrap up. We're running out of time. There are definitely more on this list of emotional control that you and I both could talk about forever. So, if you're really resonating with the emotional control aspect, and if you were any part of evangelical Christianity, my guess is you can. I would highly recommend going to the website, checking it out. We'll have it in the show notes just so it's easier to find. But take some time. Think about how you have been emotionally manipulated. Think about certain emotions you weren't allowed to express. Anger. You're forced to forgive everybody. You're not allowed to look lustfully at anyone apart from your spouse if you're married. Just, imagine all the ways that there would have been a stop sign in front of you and find find some way forward to process that and find some healing and find the freedom. The freedom to explore those things, realize that you have permission, you're a human, you're allowed to feel all these things. And hopefully by being aware of the way that this bite model is used, we all can be a little more informed on how to move forward in our experiences within the world, within religion, if we're still there, just to be claiming and reclaiming the autonomy that each and every one of us deserves. Do you have anything else
Amen.
you want to add?
Amen.
All right. Thanks, people, for tuning in for the special 4-part series of understanding and tearing apart our experiences within the authority of the bite model within cults. We love you all. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Until next time,
Peace
peace out,
out,
MFers.
MFers.
Well, friends, that wraps up this heretical episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to rate and review our podcast and share with anyone who would be encouraged. See you next time.